Hi, my name is Callum Henderson, and I'd like to share a little bit with you about a couple of books I've written which really cover most of the work of Comfort International and are probably worth reading from the perspective of knowing a little bit more about where our work came from and getting some of the real in-depth personal stories of some of the people that we work with. So the first book is Beauty from Ashes. When I first went out to Rwanda, one of the first things that began to happen was that people who had survived the genocide began to tell their stories. And that was 1999, and for several years it was very, very traumatic. People were deeply, deeply traumatized by the genocide. And so we would have meetings where people gathered together and then they would share their stories, they would break down, they would scream, they would sob. It was a very, very distressing time. But what we began to realize was that they had a deep, deep longing to share their story so that their pain and their trauma could be validated through the way that we listened and participated in their recovery by listening. And what happened was that over time we began to realize these people really want us to know their stories, so why not think about writing a book? And so I spoke to one of our partners, who was a man called Jean Kigwandi, working with Solace Ministries, and I said to him, why don't you write a book about those stories, and I can go over it and make sure it's kind of culturally readable in our context. And he was very up for that. So we said, okay, on you go, write the first chapter. But he was a very busy man doing more important things than writing stories, however important those stories were. And so the stories didn't get written. And he came back to me eventually and said, listen, you write the first chapter and then that'll get it started. So I wrote the first chapter. I came back to him and said, okay, you write the second chapter. And after a wee while, he came back and said, you write the second chapter, and so on. And so what happened was, in the end, that I actually wrote the book myself. But these are the stories of survivors. These are the stories that have been through the genocide. These are the stories of people that firstly told us their stories and then participated with us so that their stories could go to a wider audience. And there are all sorts of people. There are people who were orphaned. There are people who were buried alive. There were people who were raped. There are people who have forgiven each other. There are perpetrators who've repented. All sorts of stories, and it really gives a great insight into what was happening over the genocide. So very much worth reading from that perspective. And then as time went on, we became very involved with an area called Bisesero. Now, there was only one area in Rwanda where there was an organised resistance that went on for any period of time, and that was at Bisesero. And so the survivors at Bisesero, they gathered on the hills there, and they defended themselves with sticks and stones against the militias, against the gendarmerie, against the army, who all came against them with mortars, with guns. And out of round about 50,000 people, we think about 46,000 people were killed. And so this is the book here. It's Unforgotten, and it is what it says on the cover. It's a book that is saying we have not forgotten the people of Bisesero, and it is the story of what went on over that period of time. And again, very, very traumatic, but I think it's inspiring to read of how people have not just survived, but have recovered and flourished and built a new community and reconciled out of the tragedy of the genocide. So Beauty from Ashes, Unforgotten, if you get the chance, read them, and they'll give you more of a perspective and a picture of the work that we've been doing. So bless you so much, and thank you for listening.